can, but yeah, like they said, it'll.
Okay.
So if I turn my camera on,
Yep.
I can go to Canvas still, and I'll be able to take the quiz.
Yeah, but can you turn your camera on?
Yes, hold on.
Oh,
Camera on.
where where are you?
I'm sitting
There
in.
you are. There you are. And I know you're in your car, and I know that's a no-no, but you have such extenuating circumstances that, you know what? First and foremost, Aisha, I'm glad you're safe.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad you're safe. And same with Amanda, and same with Jenny. Where's Jenny? There you are, Jenny. I'm glad you guys are safe.
I stayed at my
Jeez,
brother's house because I lost electric
jeez.
at 3 o'clock on
Oh,
Wednesday. So I
jeez.
was like, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah.
My brother
What
never
a
lost electric.
nightmare.
He sucks.
I think the rest of my students, Richmond, you guys are unaffected, right? Columbus, you guys are unaffected, right? Norfolk, who else do I have? Centerville, Scranton, everybody else doing okay? All right, so we've got three Port St. Lucie students and they all seem good. And I'm sorry for what you've had to go through. Okay, so let's see. It's 4:03. We'll wait for any late stragglers, but if you tried to open quiz one, you're going to have to refresh it, okay? Because it wasn't available until the top of the hour.
Okay, so let me go back. Can you still see me?
I can still see you. So everybody that tried to open it before 3 minutes ago is going to have to refresh and it should be available. Do you guys see it? Don't start it yet, but do you see it?
Yeah, it says take the quiz.
Okay. All right. So everybody just refresh. So what we're going to do is we'll start the quiz here in a minute. It's 15 minutes timed. Take your time doing it. After you see the quiz, you're going to start to see rationales pop up for every question, which I think are awesome. We'll talk about that after the
I
quiz.
don't see the quiz. Is it quiz two?
Quiz one.
Quiz one.
Okay.
Quiz one's nothing else is published except quiz one.
Okay,
I don't see it either.
I don't see it.
Right?
I think it's under modules 2 or 3 when I found it.
It would be under
Week two,
two.
modules, week two.
Yep.
Okay, so
Under your
I
modules, under activities. You see
so
it?
for some reason my week two is saying that it's locked, and I
Uh,
see the quiz under my things to do in Canvas, but it has a zero in, and it says this assignment is part of module two and hasn't been unlocked yet.
I wonder if it's because you're wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're in my Tuesday class. I have to adjust the settings in my Tuesday class. All right, so Aisha, you hang tight.
Okay,
Actually, let me just go ahead and do that right now while everybody's refreshing. Thank
okay.
you, thank you, thank you. Let me go back in and adjust that. Yep. You are so smart. Thank you. Okay, let me open that up for you. Okay, available. Let's clear that. Today's the 11th. Okay, Aisha, go in and refresh and try it, please. So we'll wait. I'm gonna wait for Aisha to give me the clear, but in the meantime, everybody please stay on camera while you're doing the quiz, okay? 15 minutes, make sure you hit submit. You can go off camera if you finish early, but stay logged in. Okay, just you can go off camera. So it's 15 minutes, it's 4:07. So we will start back at 4:25. okay? 425. There is an access code, and it's pretty easy. It's my last name. I'm putting it in the chat. Does everybody see the access code in the chat? Aisha, are you able to access the quiz?
No, whatever you did, the whole quiz just went away out of my things to do. And so I'm
Because-
going in through the modules.
Now going through the module. Aisha, I'm gonna put you in a breakout room,
Okay.
all right? And I'll come back to you in a minute so I can get everybody started.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yes.
All right, let me get you in there. You need to accept the, where are you? You need to accept the invitation. There you go. Okay. All right, so everybody have the quiz. You're okay to start. Put in my code. I'm gonna mute myself and I'll see you all at 4:25. I'm gonna help Aisha, okay? Dr. Kapteros is on here proctoring you. I'm gonna jump to the breakout room. And everybody mute themselves, please. Thanks. Hi. You see it yet?
Yes, I see it under, hold on. I see it under my I see it under my week 2, but
Okay.
for some reason my week 2 is saying prereqs course welcome. It's saying
Oh, hang on. You might have to go back and take that because, well, no, you shouldn't. Do you have your technology? Let me look.
yes, I did both of them.
Then you should be able to, hang on, hang on, let me see what it, 1 second. Quiz 1, I'm taking that 0 out. Let's see if that helps.
Okay.
Okay, just took a 0 out.
Okay, let me refresh again.
Refresh. Yep, you have the technology. Yep, you have that. Okay, refresh.
It's still saying it's locked for some reason.
Hmm.
Like, is it because they took me out and put me back in? Like, it's not even popping up under my things to do, like even under like late and like assignments.
You don't even have it in your week 2 module now?
See module. What? Let me try to log on from the internet.
Yeah,
instead
do
of
that because I've taken everything out. Due dates, it says available October 11th. Oh, at 10 a.m., which is today, which was this morning. So it should definitely be available to you. So do what you just said you were going to do.
Okay, log on from the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Canvas, log on. Canvas student log on. No, not instructor, student login. Please get out my hair, please. Sit back. At my.fortis.edu. Okay. log in. Not now.
Any
Oh,
luck?
what is this?
No, for some reason now my password isn't working. Give me one. Oh
Okay.
God, I know my password. Refresh. It's loading.
Okay. Take your
Week
time.
2. Sanders. Unit exam. Quiz 1. No date. Okay, now it says take quiz.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna put you back in the main session, okay?
Okay. Is there a password?
No, I'm just gonna put you back in.
What was the access code again?
Everybody getting done? There's a few students yes, that would be great, Dr. Kapteros. If you want to, do you have access to getting into breakout rooms? Okay. If you could pull Kara in one. I'm just going to mute myself.
I don't have access to see who's in any, I don't have,
You do or don't? I don't want Kara to miss the going over the quiz and going over the rationales. Right? Well, I guess Kara could watch the recording, right? She can go into a breakout
I
room
mean,
and
it's up to you. I just didn't want to slow class down. She was at almost a half hour late, so
oh,
she's
oh,
just starting the quiz, just starting.
oh. All right. Let me pull Kara into a breakout room real quick and speak with her. Real quick.
Oh, wait,
So-
I can go in. I can go in. You would put her
Okay.
in room 1.
Okay. If you could pull her into her breakout room, and then I'll start reviewing everything with the rest of the class. Okay. Could
Okay.
everybody come back on camera? Kara's going to go into a breakout room. Okay. Hang tight, you guys. 10 seconds. Okay. How'd you do? How did you prepare for class? What kinds of things did you do?
I wrote out
I wrote out the stuff.
PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Did you
reviewed
watch
your
both?
2
Did you watch both of
concept
the
videos.
content recordings?
Yeah, I watched the
I
concept
watched some.
videos,
Okay.
both of them.
Okay. All right. Let's go. Did you see the rationales and the quizzes that I put in?
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. I started this last term. Okay. Because when it comes to exam time, I always encourage you to go back and look at the quiz rationales. I do a lot of teaching from my rationales, as far as you'll see that first question, we're going to go through it. What's community-based nursing versus community-oriented nursing? And then what are the levels of prevention? I like to do the rationales because it gives you a basis of each of the concepts that we're doing, right? And then you have them. So as you're preparing for the exam, you can go and start to go back. You can go and use that as another resource to review all your rationales. So I'll do a lot of my teaching in the next hour from the rationales, and then I'll go back to my notes and see what we haven't covered. But Anastasia, go ahead.
So I have a question about number 4. It
Okay,
says,
let's wait till we get to it, okay? Because we're going to go through each question.
okay.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen and pull up the quiz. Okay?
Just wish you could have gave more examples of community-based nursing and the oriented community nursing. So
More examples. Do you mean in?
yeah,
Well,
more
I mean,
examples.
if you look at the quiz, as I told you in week 1, I developed let me share my screen. I developed my quiz questions from your readings, from the concept recordings. And so in your readings, it gave you a general overview of what's the difference between community-based nursing and community-oriented nursing. Okay, this question gives you examples, right? So let's jump to the rationale first. Okay, from your reading, the way to understand community-oriented nursing and community-based nursing, all right? If you think of oriented, think of yourself as orienting you to the entire community. It's population-based. You're looking at whatever the health needs are as a nurse in the community. All right, so community-oriented nursing is oriented around the entire community or population. It's primarily focused on health promotion rather than illness care. It's the whole group. This is the whole difference right here. It's the whole group rather than the individual. If you are focused on community-based nursing, think of it as you are based in the community. You are based. So what are all the roles and places we talked about last week? Hospice nurse, school nurse, dialysis nurse, home health nurse, maybe an occupational nurse. Think of all those nursing roles we talked about then that are based in the community. So you're taking care of individuals or families. So for example, when I was a school nurse for 20 years, my clients were the kids, right? I was based in the schools. A hospice nurse can be based in the home or based in a hospice center. An occupational nurse is based in, what do we say occupational nursing was? Workforce. So the occupational nurse is based in a work setting, right? A home health nurse, she is based in the client's home, right? So that's the big difference. It's a big picture community versus an individualized client. All right. So if you look at the first quiz question, the only one that's community-based is B, educating the child and school teacher on the use of an inhaler. That's a school nurse, right? And she's based in the schools taking care of an individual. So in this case, it's one of the kids in the schools. But if you look at the other three examples, those are all examples of community-oriented nursing. All right, developing a teen pregnancy prevention program. That's focused on a subset of the population. Okay, evaluating the outcomes of a community vaccination program. Right, that's focused on an aggregate of the population, right? And then providing diabetes education prior to hospital discharge. That's focused on an aggregate of the population that has diabetes. Okay. Questions on that question. So I want to make sure you have a good understanding of the difference between community-oriented nursing and community-based nursing. Any questions? Question 2 talks about the Healthy People 2030 campaign. So one of your assignments from week 1 was to go in from the link in your module into the Healthy People 2030 website. If you did, you would have a good understanding of this question, all right? The rationale talks about their objectives, national objectives. Tell me what you saw when you went into the website. Was it informative? Was it helpful? Did you get a good history of what it is, what the program is? What did you learn? Anybody?
It's guidelines that are updated like every 10 years to
Exactly.
be
Yep.
healthy.
Yep. And actually, Healthy People started in 2000, right? Then we had 2010, then we had the 2020, and now we're up to 2030. It looks at health initiatives for everybody over the next decade. Okay, so let's look at the rationale here. Healthy People 2030 is a data-driven, their national objectives to improve the health and well-being over the next decade. And the key with Healthy People 2030, it includes all. Okay, if you look up to the answers, right, that A, it provides a framework to improve health for all Americans. Okay, B, C, and D are incorrect. It does not focus on the most common chronic diseases. It has nothing to do with the nursing curriculum across states. Okay, and it changes the focus from community to individualized health. No. It is looking at the health and to improve the health and well-being for all. Okay, so there are 5 overarching goals to this program. And study this for your exam because there's some Healthy People 2030 questions on your exam. Okay, so their overarching goals: attain healthy, thriving lives and well-being, free from preventable disease, disability, injury, premature death. try and eliminate health disparities, achieve health equity, and attain health literacy to improve the health and well-being for all. It's for everybody. Create social, physical, economic environments that promote attaining the full potential for health and well-being for all. Promote healthy development, healthy behaviors, and well-being across all life stages. And lastly, engage leadership, key constituents, and the public across multiple sectors to act and design policies that improve the health and well-being for all. Okay, so you can see from this rationale, it is intended to benefit everybody.
Professor Marvel, are you leaving these quizzes open so we can go?
Yeah, they're open. Oh,
Yeah.
good point. Good point. Yeah, I have to take out the unavailable after. Good point. I will do that. Thank you. You will have these quizzes will be open for you to go back and review. Yes. Yes, that is the intention. Okay. Okay, question 3 starts to talk about vulnerability. Okay, this is part of your introduction to vulnerability. And let's just think of this question. Let's just think of this question overall. Okay, which is true if you are working with people that are uninsured or underinsured, don't even look at the question yet. What risks might they face? Just think off the top of your head. Uninsured, underinsured people. What might be some challenges they will have?
Well, they won't be able to
Money.
see their doctor on a regular basis because of that.
Say that again, Janelle.
They won't be able to go to the doctor on a regular basis, like get their physicals, yearly physicals and stuff.
Yep.
Preventative
What else?
care.
What else?
Money because they won't have, because they'll have to be paying more money for co-pays and more out-of-pocket money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What else? So Janelle pretty much hit it. Okay. Uninsured, underinsured people do not focus on primary care. They don't focus on prevention, right? And so if you look at the answers to the question, they are more likely to be diagnosed with advanced disease. That is true. That is the correct answer because if they're underinsured, uninsured, they may have limited access. Like I said, they don't focus on primary prevention. Therefore, by the time you get to see these individuals, they're more than likely to be at an advanced stage of whatever's going on. Right? If you look at the other 3 answers, they are less likely to attend preventative wellness visits. So A is just the opposite. They are more likely to develop preventable diseases, right? So B is just the opposite. And then D is just the opposite. They are more likely to need government health resources. So in our introduction to vulnerability, let's take a look at the rationale. It's a good introduction, good summary of your reading. Vulnerability has many aspects. It often comes from feeling a lack of power, limited control, victimization, disadvantaged status, disenfranchisement, health risks. Members of the vulnerable population often have multiple illnesses with each affecting the other. We call those comorbidities. Some of these people do not always succumb to the health risks, and it's important to help them develop resilience. We'll talk about that in a few questions. So some of our nursing interventions with vulnerable populations should include strategies that will increase resources or reduce health risks to decrease health disparities between vulnerable populations and those that are not vulnerable. Does that sound like a good overview of vulnerability? What else would you add to vulnerability? What else did you learn about your intro to vulnerability?
It includes young people and older people.
Yep, that's our next question. Who's vulnerable? What are some populations that are vulnerable? Just off the top of your head. Children,
Veterans.
elderly. Who else?
Veterans.
Homeless.
Language barrier.
Pardon me?
Language barrier.
Language barrier, non-English speakers.
Pregnant adolescents.
Pregnant teens, pregnant adolescents, absolutely. I think I heard somebody say veterans. People with
You did.
HIV. Go ahead.
HIV.
Pardon me?
HIV.
Yep. People with HIV.
I have a question though
Go ahead.
about this one.
Yep,
In
go ahead.
parentheses, it says population. And in my notes that I studied, I had I had vulnerable groups based on location, which is where chronically ill was. And then I had vulnerable population groups, which would be vulnerable population. And that one was different. Did not have chronically ill, I had mentally ill. So that one kind of confused me. I didn't pick HIV because I was thinking of the population, which would have been not included in my notes at least. So that confused me.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You have the vulnerable
I
group.
thought pregnant women was also, sorry,
vulnerable
Janelle.
population separate.
That one doesn't count because it's if they're under the age of 18, they're vulnerable.
Which would
Go ahead,
So the
Anastasia.
pregnant women is not vulnerable, like, at
Hang
all?
on, Anastasia, go ahead. Anastasia, go ahead.
So that's where what I was kind of running into with pregnant women, because I mean, they're susceptible to diseases, they're susceptible to abuse, mental factors, all types of stuff. So I was kind of curious as to why that was wrong.
So it's pregnant,
Right.
for purposes of this class, it is a pregnant adolescent that is considered vulnerable. We don't consider every pregnancy vulnerable. Some may be, but we don't consider every pregnancy vulnerable. So this, if it was a teen, an adolescent pregnant, that is automatically considered a vulnerable population. We don't consider all pregnancies in a category of vulnerable.
Okay.
I just
So
thought
a 19-year-old substance abuser is automatically vulnerable, even though they choosing to be an
Well,
abuser?
well, we didn't say that again about the substance abuser. Go ahead.
So the 19-year-old substance abuser is a vulnerable individual, even though they're choosing to be an abuser. I mean, I'm not getting that.
So, with the veteran, with the substance abuser, and with the person with HIV, the age doesn't even matter. Okay, somebody who's considered a substance abuser is considered vulnerable. Any veteran at any age is vulnerable. Any person with HIV at any age is vulnerable. The pregnant woman, for purposes of this class, needs to be an adolescent pregnant woman. Okay. And so the other question that Janelle was saying, part of the vulnerable, somebody with HIV is considered part of the vulnerable population. That's just a given. And that was in your readings. Janelle, I can't see you because I have my screen shared. I can only see a few students.
Oh, I have I understood that because I have it in my notes, but I had it written into vulnerable population, vulnerable groups based on location. That's what it said. So it's not the same as the vulnerable population. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the question was asking
That's where I
what
got
client belongs to a vulnerable population.
Yeah, that's where I got confused. Because
Okay.
that answer was in the vulnerable group by
Yeah.
location.
Okay. Okay. This rationale continues on with vulnerability. Vulnerability is defined. This is an actual real good summation of vulnerability. Defined as a susceptibility. You're susceptible to an actual or potential stressor that may lead to an adverse effect. Okay, vulnerability to poor health does not mean that some people have personal deficiencies. Okay, rather it results from interacting effects of many internal and external factors for which people have little to no control over. I think a couple of people probably need to mute. There's a lot of background noise.
Need to observe what's in it.
Okay. Let me see who needs to. Sorry to interrupt. Let me go through and see who I need to mute here. A lot of background noise. Okay. Okay, so we're talking about internal and external factors in which people have no control over. Let's say you have some biological limitations. Maybe you have genetic risks. Maybe you have a family history of cancer, family history of alcoholism, family history of something. Okay, that is a risk that you don't have a lot of control over, right? What about you living in a community that has severe pollution? You live in a community that's older that may have increased risk for lead-based paint, exposure to lead-based paint. Excessive noise in your community from, say, factories or other external factors.
So then are you vulnerable if you're a 26-year-old pregnant woman that lives in those areas? Or, I mean, like, I guess I'm confused. I'm still confused.
Okay. Teen pregnancy is considered the vulnerable population. It was asking, the question didn't say it's a 26-year-old that lives in a community that has pollution and so they're at risk. You just need to take what the question asked. What is considered a vulnerable population? If it gave all those additional details in that question, then there may be a different answer. But it was simply asking who is a vulnerable population. It didn't describe where they lived or what internal or external factors there was.
Never add on to the answer because then you'll get it wrong. Just look at what is given in front of you.
So
Don't add on.
That's one of my test taking strategy tips is whatever information is in the question is all you need to pick the answer. Please don't add additional information into the question. This isn't just for Jessica. This is just in general. Okay. Don't add if information is not in the question, it doesn't exist. Okay. So I know there's a lot of students that overthink things. Well, what if? Well, I think I heard that somewhere. I think I heard that somewhere. Don't add that information into the question. The question was simply asking who is a vulnerable population. Okay. And a 26-year-old pregnant woman is not, from what we know, she's 26 and pregnant. That is not considered vulnerable. Now, we don't know if she has other things going on. That's not part of the question. Okay.
Do you have more like reviews to add on to the reading that we get? That way we're able to kind of test our knowledge before we're actually quizzed on it. Because I don't think a lot of us, even though we're reading it and it is a lot of information to retain, I don't think some of us are still grasping the idea between community-based and the community thinking. Like, we're not really grasping the idea. And so are there more reviews that you could add into our modules that correlate with our reading that help us focus better?
Okay, Jessica, why don't you stay on after? Okay. We'll go into more detail about that. Why don't you stand after and you and I can talk about that. Okay. Thanks.
Professor Marvel, I had a question before you continue.
Sure.
This information that's on the quiz, we're going to be covering that today in class.
We're covering it now.
So the information like that we just took, that's on the quiz, we're covering it now, but not like, you don't have like PowerPoints or anything on it?
PowerPoints. The quizzes are intended to assess your preparation for class. That preparation includes watching the concept recordings, reviewing the PowerPoints, and doing the assigned reading. And then when you take your quiz, then we review the quiz and begin to dive into the concepts. And then I do additional lecturing on the concepts for what we haven't covered in the quiz rationales. Does that make sense?
So we dive into the concepts in the class after the quiz review.
Right? But by doing all your readings, you should already have a good overview of, or start to get an overview of these concepts, because the quiz questions that I put together are from your pre-class readings, the concept recording, the readings, PowerPoint.
That BMI question, that was not on none of the readings.
Which wasn't?
I think it was question 10. We'll get there.
Okay.
I was saying I would have preferred to take the quiz at the end of class after we covered the information.
Yeah. Well, you know, I went through in week 1, there's a slide in our orientation PowerPoint that talks about quizzes and talks about quizzes are given at the beginning of class in all of your classes. It's not just this class. I assume you're taking your quizzes at the beginning of the class in the rest of your classes? Is that
Not
right?
like not for
Most
information that
teachers
wasn't
are,
over
they
yet.
will review a little bit of the content before we take it so that they make sure we understand.
Yeah, or have it at the end of class.
You do have classes that you take quizzes at the end of class, Shania?
Only if we didn't already review the information.
Okay. 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 Let's move on to the next question. What is resiliency? Tell me about resiliency. What does being resilient mean?
Resilient is like, to me, it's to overcome stuff. But in this case, I feel like, so resiliency reduces our vulnerability to certain risks.
Correct. Correct. That's how we talk about resiliency
Yeah.
in this class.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
we're
resilient is you can overcome things. Maybe
Right.
somebody else can't. Like if I'm homeless, I might adjust to that homeless life a little bit differently than someone else. Do you know what I mean?
correct. And so many of our community clients that we work with are vulnerable and lack resiliency. And so one of our goals as community nurses working with our vulnerable populations is to try and increase the resiliency of these populations. Okay, we know that resiliency is influenced by early life experiences, negative events in childhood that aren't dealt with through counseling or other approaches can decrease resiliency. We know that the higher levels of confidence that you have increases your resiliency. Okay, if you look at the question, which statement reflects the term resiliency as it relates to vulnerability? Okay, so we know that having resiliency reduces our vulnerability to certain risks, right? Just like Janelle just said. Right? The other three are the opposite. Resiliency decreases the likelihood that you'll get sick. The more resilient you are, the better able you are to address your risks. Resiliency depends solely on genetic predisposition? No, absolutely not. Okay, and resiliency cannot be learned if you don't possess it. It actually can be learned. And that's what we work with our community clients who need to develop resiliency. Okay, a lot of times in the schools, I worked with younger kids, middle-aged kids, high school kids to develop resiliency. And I remember specifically working with so many kids that had just been diagnosed with diabetes. Right? And they were devastated. The parents were devastated. It was a hard process to go through with these families. And you had to work with these kids and their parents to develop some kind of resiliency that to start to attack all the challenges that come along with it. So resiliency is something that we definitely work on with our vulnerable populations in the community. Okay, this is a school nurse question. Which child should the school nurse care for first? What's an important word in this question?
First.
First.
First
Okay, this is
priority.
considered a priority question. So we're
This
looking
one threw me for
for,
a loop.
pardon me?
This one threw me for a loop.
Okay. So looking at all these four, okay, this is a good example of a question that there could be potentially more than one right answer, but it's not a select all that apply. So what do you do in that case? You go back and read the question to see if there was something that you missed. Okay. And that's something that you may have missed if other answers look correct is who do you care for first? Okay. So we know by reading all these answers that all these kids are going to have to get seen, right? All their
Yes.
issues are going to have to be addressed. But who's a priority? Who needs to be seen first?
Airway.
The airway.
It's always ABCs.
Exactly. Exactly. Because what are these potential impending signs and symptoms of? Asthma attack?
Asthma.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just thinking like a regular cough. I wasn't like, you know what I mean?
You were
Putting it all
thinking what?
like I was just thinking like a regular cough. You know, kids cough, like a cold cough. That's where it threw me for a loop. So I
Oh,
didn't get the asthma part out of it, but
yeah, yeah.
It's
I see
typically
it
if
now.
they're exerted
Okay.
during exercise and physical things, that's a huge problem.
Pardon me?
When they're exerted with physical exercise or minimal exercise, it's a problem.
Mhm. So the key word in picking that was who is first. Okay. And again, after you deal with our 9-year-old, then you'll go back and address all the rest of them. Okay. So as an introduction to school nursing, in this rationale, here's a lot of different roles that school nurses play. I'm not sure how much you know about school nurses. There was a reading page about school nurses. They play many different roles. Direct caregivers, right? They are caring for the very complex, chronic, ill children in the buildings. I know when I was in school nursing, I was doing catheterizations, both male and female. I was doing trach care, trach suctioning, insulin injections, insulin pumps, seizure medications, inhalers, EpiPens. Okay. Health educators, school nurses are also health educators to a lot of different populations. We're educators to the teachers, to the clinic staff, to the administrators, to the parents, and to the kids. Okay, we're providing health information in regards to growth and development. We are doing screenings, vision and hearing screenings. Okay, we're teaching about substance abuse prevention, good hand hygiene, illness prevention, talking about diet, exercise, and lots of other things. So we're health educators. We're also consultants. Okay, we consult with whatever buildings we're in. Okay, because the staff needs to know what kind of health issues they have going on in their building. Right? How many kids do we have with asthma? How many of those kids have inhalers in the clinic? How many kids do we have with severe allergies? Who has EpiPens in the clinic or who's self-carrying EpiPens? Where's their insulin located? Where's their backup insulin located if the pump goes down? Okay, so we're the health consultant for the building. We're also case managers. Okay, case management we'll talk about later on in the term, but case management, a case manager is essentially the coordinator of care. Okay, so when you have complex chronic illnesses with children, the nurse becomes a case manager. They may need lots of different services in the schools, PT, OT, behavioral, psych, speech. Okay, so we are coordinating all of that. And then community outreach. Typically, the school nurse is very involved with community outreach. Okay, we may participate or develop health fairs, do immunization clinics. Okay, may bring people in to speak to kids on different topics for different age groups. bicycle safety, or helmet safety, seatbelt safety, substance abuse prevention. Okay? So that school nurse plays a lot of roles. Okay, in week 2, you had a lot of your common childhood ailments to review. And so this was a question about iron deficiency anemia, and in particular, what foods to be selected. So we know with which food should the nurse recommend for a child with iron deficiency anemia. We know that foods high in iron. Okay, so that would be your eggs, your egg whites. Okay. And the other thing I'll mention now before I forget is, as you're reviewing for the exam in a couple of weeks, it's fine to do the snippets of reading for each of your common childhood ailments that are in your week 2 reading. But another great resource for studying for all these common childhood ailments is the discussion board for week 2. Because all of you had to pick 3 common childhood ailments and go through and investigate. What is it? What does it look like? What's the treatment? There were a few questions you had to answer about it. So if you go through the discussion board, you're likely to find every common childhood ailment mentioned in that discussion board. So I just mentioned that as an additional resource as you're preparing for the exam, because there are a lot of questions on exam 1 regarding common childhood ailments. Okay, so if you want to do some additional reading, go through the discussion board and have a look at them. Okay. Another common childhood ailment we talked about, or that you read about, was the possibility of diabetes. Okay, and we know that dark discoloration along the neck crease in the armpits of a child, the acanthosis nigricans, is an early sign of potential diabetes. So what step would we ask the nurse to take? We would definitely advise the parents to obtain a medical evaluation, since this is one of the common early symptoms of that. And the rationale, I gave you a description of the AN. Okay, and then children can have type 2 diabetes, and rates of type 1 and type 2 diabetes is on the rise. Okay, they're higher in ethnic minorities, including Hispanic, African American, and American Indian. Okay, and we know that AN is a common sign of type 2 diabetes. Okay. In our readings about common childhood ailments, one of them was lead exposure. And in reading about lead exposure, we understand that one of the risks of lead exposure is potential developmental delays, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so which nursing intervention is a priority? Again, another important word. What is a priority for a child experiencing developmental delay?
A.
Since we're talking about potential lead exposure in week 2, we would evaluate the environment for potential lead exposure. And the rationale, I gave you the learning points about lead exposure. Okay, so you can compare those with the readings you did about lead exposure. Okay. Key thing about lead exposure is prior to 1978. Okay, prior to 1978, lead was present in paint that was made and applied. And one of the concerns we have is that paint chips away. And kids putting paint chips in their mouths. If chips are inhaled or orally consumed by those exposed. Okay? Lots of issues with lead exposure with young kids. Nurse notes that a child's BMI is in the 90th percentile. Which intervention is appropriate? Let's just think of this. Don't even look at the answers yet. You're working with a child that has a BMI in the 90th percentile. What are your thoughts? What do you think is going on?
I was thinking of very morbidly obese, and I was thinking like fluid overload or something.
You're thinking what?
I was thinking like fluid overload and stuff. I don't know why. I put refer for urgent medical evaluation, but I get it.
Okay.
My
So we
brain
know-
went a different area. I don't know where it was going.
So we know that a kid who has a BMI in the 90th percentile is either very at risk to be obese or is starting to become obese. Okay? And so we need to make the assumption there's no need for an urgent medical evaluation. We need to make the assumption that the parents are working with the proper physicians or doctors, whatever, or school to address this. Okay? We definitely wouldn't advise frequent snacking throughout the day, right? We don't need to refer for an urgent medical evaluation. We're just giving you an assessment. The child is in the 90th percentile. That presents risks. Okay? And we certainly wouldn't recommend 100% fruit juice with meals and between meals. But we could encourage the parents to reduce the overall screen time. What made that produce?
Might get up and do something.
Get up and do something. Get up
Make
and
them go
move. Get
outside
some
and play.
exercise. Get some exercise. Go outside and play. Okay. Somebody said they had a question about this question. Does that make sense?
It was me, but I just don't remember seeing this in any part of the readings that I went over or in the concept recordings.
Okay. Well, think about this question though. If you have a child that has a BMI, we're thinking of common childhood ailments. So here we're thinking obesity. What would you think about a child that's in the 90th percentile? Asia.
There's something wrong. I mean, I got the question right,
Mhm.
but it's just that, if I didn't have a kid on my own, I probably wouldn't have known the answer because it wasn't in the readings or the concept recordings.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint from week 1 and we're going to cover some additional information on each of the concepts. Okay. So here were we covered quite a bit in the rationales, but I want to add to that. Okay. So here were the 4 concepts we covered in week 1. Okay. I think we talked pretty extensively about community-oriented nursing and community-based nursing. Okay. You're oriented around the community or population. Community-based, you're based in the community. And just for reference, public health. If you think about public health is very similar. It falls right in line with community-oriented nursing. A public health nurse is looking at the health of the whole community. Okay? And that should have been in the chapter reading you had for week 1. Okay? The one thing we didn't address in the quiz question is the quiz questions. It will come up next week. But one of the concepts we need to understand is primary levels of prevention. And I know you've heard this in other classes, correct? You've heard about primary, secondary, and tertiary? Okay. So what is primary prevention? Where's primary?
It's like
Just to prevent it before it even happened.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's think of primary interventions we could be performing or doing in the community. We're trying to prevent something before it happens. What could we be doing?
immunizations.
Immunizations. What else?
Hand hygiene.
Hand hygiene. What else? What about Bike safety, wearing helmets,
Yeah, seat belts and stuff.
seat belts. What about substance abuse prevention? Alcohol education. We're trying to prevent something before it happens. Okay. Secondary is screening. I think of secondary as early identification, early intervention. We are screening for risk. Okay, so that might be a mammogram,
Yeah, pap smear.
Tuberculosis.
pap smear, skin testing for tuberculosis. We screen, let's see, annual blood pressure screenings, blood glucose screenings. We are screening for risk. The idea was
Colonoscopy.
colonoscopy, screening. The idea of screening is to identify something at the early stages and hopes that the course can be reversed, minimize the signs and symptoms, try and reverse it. All right, so what other things can we screen for? In the schools, we screen for suicide. We screen for
eyes and lice.
Yep. In the schools, we did vision and hearing screenings. You're screening for risk. And then tertiary, the important thing to remember about tertiary is you have to have something. You have had an accident, you have an injury, you have a condition, you have a diagnosis, and it's all about treatment and management. So something has to have occurred. Okay. The one thing I want to mention about all three, a lot of students get caught up with education being only at the primary level. Okay. Education is at all three levels. Okay. In primary, we're educating to prevent. Okay. In secondary, we have identified risk. So we are educating to try and reverse that risk. In tertiary, you have something, diagnosis, condition, TBI, something's happened. We are educating to manage, right? To manage the symptoms, manage the disease, manage the condition. Okay, there's going to be primary, secondary, tertiary questions on the rest of the quizzes, and they're going to be on the exams, and there's several on the HESI. Okay, so we have to have a good understanding of primary, secondary, and tertiary. All right, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about those each week. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, we covered Healthy People 2030, and in slide 6, I pretty much copy and pasted this slide 6 into your Healthy People 2030 quiz question rationale. Okay, so I've already reviewed that. Vulnerability. Introduction to vulnerable populations. So we know that what would be some vulnerable groups based on location? Something Janelle brought up. What would be vulnerable locations? What would be a vulnerable location?
Living in like a rural area.
Perfect, Kristen. Yes, and we're going to talk about rural populations of migrants next week. Based on location. What other rural areas? Maybe mountain areas?
Low income areas.
Low income areas, communities that have a lot of poverty. What other locations? What about if you live in a community that's near a big transportation hub? Right? You may have increased risk vulnerability because of air pollution, maybe river, stream, water pollution. Okay? But rural is a big area of vulnerability. Groups, children, elderly, chronically ill. Talked about these, non-English speakers. What are some factors that affect vulnerable populations? We know that Factors affecting vulnerable populations, first is their vulnerability. We're not going to talk about the epidemiological triangle. We'll talk about that when we get to our infection control. What do we mean when we say cumulative risks? What does that mean? What are cumulative risks? They're risks that keep building, right? They're cumulative, one on top of the other. And then we talked about resilience in one of our quiz questions, okay, or the lack of resilience, disenfranchisement, and poverty. Groups, the poor, people live in poverty, individuals, families, communities, the homeless, pregnant teens, veterans, migrant workers, immigrants, mentally ill, substance abusers. Social determinants of health. We didn't have a quiz question about that, so I want to explain that to you. That's a fancy word of saying, how do we determine an individual's health, a family's health, a community's health? What are the social determinants of health? And there's 5 domains we look at. And these are looked at for everybody, but they all look different with everybody, with each individual, family, and community. What is the economic stability of the individual, the family, the community? What kind of education access is there? And what kind of quality of education? What kind of health access and quality? What kind of neighborhood do people live in? Is it a newer community, older community? Because we know the risks associated with older communities. And what is the social and community context? That's a fancy way of saying, what kind of resources are in the community to support the population? Are there rec centers? Are there parks for kids? Are there walking paths? Are there places of worship? Are there community groups, book clubs, kids' sports? All that. Can you see how each of these 5 will help determine the health of an individual, family, or community? So these are the 5 domains we look at. And if all these are going well, there's people can support themselves, good education, have health care, live in a decent neighborhood, lots of resources, and that's great. That's great. But what if one or more of these are not working? That's how you create this vulnerability, right? Okay, let's look at our week 2 PowerPoint and see what we want to cover additionally. So school nurse, growth and development, common childhood ailments, family nursing, family health risks. So we talked about school nurses. And really what I want you to know about school nursing is what their role is. What can their role be? What are all the different roles they may have? We talked about direct caregiver, health educator, consultant, case manager, and doing community outreach. Okay. Here's some examples of primary, secondary, and tertiary interventions with regards to school nursing. And, when you think about primary, secondary, tertiary going forward, think of each concept we're covering. So here, school nurse. So think of what would be primary, secondary, tertiary in the school nurse role. When we get to hospice, think of what would primary, secondary, tertiary interventions look like for a hospice nurse or a home health nurse or an occupational nurse, because they'll be different. But the underlying theme is the same, that primary is prevention, secondary is screening, tertiary is treatment. Okay, so we talked about school nurse, prevention of injuries, substance abuse prevention, trying to reduce the risk of disease. Secondary, screening for early risk identifications and early treatment. And then tertiary, treating and managing an existing condition. Okay, So that's specifically for school nurses. The only thing I want you to know about growth and development is what I want you to know about what is important in each of these stages. All right. The stages are listed out here. And I think it was chapter 11, your growth and development. Just know what's key in each of these phases. Okay, there's not a lot of growth and development questions going forward. However, you need to be able to understand, what are they thinking? What might their reactions be to things? What is their emotional development? Okay. So it says here, development includes physical, cognitive, and psychosocial aspects. That's what I want you to have an idea of with each of these phases, each of these age groups. What is important to know about physical, cognitive, and psychosocial aspects of each of these groups? And then for your common childhood ailments, you have your readings in your maternity and peds book. You have your short readings for each of these, and then you have your discussion posts with all your teammates, your classmates doing their own research. Okay, so please study these. Okay, there's lots of questions about common childhood ailments coming up.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
So for the type 1 diabetes, I know that was included for the reading this week, but wasn't that question about AN on type 2 diabetes?
It was well, yes, but it's a potential common problem for both type 1 and type 2.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And the second slide just goes through all the ones we covered. Okay, so I gave you all the resources you need to review those. Okay, and you should also be studying these in PEDS as well, are you? For the students in PEDS, are you starting to look at these? Yes, no?
I don't think we went over, like, we already took peds, at least for Scranton, but we
Okay.
didn't go over like the ailments in depth. We more so dove into like the theorists.
Okay.
Yeah, we're doing theorist right now.
Okay. The next slide is adulthood and the family. All right, so I'm now going to finish covering family nursing and family health risks. So adulthood is a time of continuing change growth. We consider young adulthood as 18 to 35, middle adulthood 35 to 65, and older adulthood starts at age 65. Okay, several things contribute to our health over a lifespan. So our lifestyle, including our diet, exercise, stress management, is a major influence on health. Hereditary, right, can also contribute. And we talked about that being predisposed to, maybe you have a family history of cancer, you have a family history of a certain medical of heart attacks, family history of substance abuse. Okay, we, as community nurses, we do a lot of teaching and we do a lot of education, right? So we do a lot of health promotion practices to help adults achieve and maintain health, right? Pardon me. Family is defined as a group of individuals who care about and are there for each other. There's no one definition for the family anymore. There's no traditional definition. It's whatever families say it is, right? When we look at, excuse me, in the community, when we look at doing family assessments, and I did this all the time as a school nurse, we have to consider certain functions of the family. Okay? And these are the functions we consider for every family. These help us to determine if a family is a functional family or maybe a dysfunctional family or somewhere in between. Okay? Yes, these are the functions we look at when we do our family assessment, and they will look different with every family. Okay? So the functions we look at: The physical maintenance, which means providing essentials for life. Do the families have a roof over their head? Do they have food on the table? Okay, are families creating an atmosphere for health and safety? Are they providing loving care and guidance, nurturance? Are they interacting appropriately with others? Your socialization. What kind of education are they doing amongst each other? Are they teaching families, parents or guardians teaching about values in the world? Okay, reproduction. Are you able to take care of the number of family members that you have? Recreation. The families spend time together. Do they go on trips together? Do they go to church together? Do they do things together? Do they have fun? And then are they pardon me, helping each other and caring for each other? Okay, so those are for a community nurse, those are some of the things we look at when we're doing our family assessments. And it will look different with every family. And you'll be able to make that assessment. Functional family, dysfunctional family. If it's a dysfunctional family, what are we going to do? What resources can we help them with? Is it an issue with adults in the family having issues, or is it kids in the families having issues? So it all depends on what our assessment shows. Meaning the level of intervention the family might need from us, the community nurse. We know that we have family risks that are genetic, environmental, and behavioral. We've already talked about genetics, right? Being predisposed to something. There's a lot of family health risks based on the environment. We've talked about some of them. What if you live in an environment that is high in poverty? What if you live in an environment that's high in crime, high in violence, high in gang activity? What if you live in an industrial community that has a lot of pollution, a lot of noise? What if you live in a community that is near a transportation hub? What else? What other are environmental risks? Think about your own community that you live in as you drive around. What environmental risks are there?
Maybe if you live next to a landfill.
Exactly. Landfill. Live near water. Potential water contamination. What are some other environmental risks in your own communities? What about agriculture, farming, chemicals? Anybody else think of anything else? And then there are family risks that are behavioral. What does that mean? Choices. Behavioral risks are our choices. Do we choose to be healthy or unhealthy? Do we choose to abuse substances? Do we choose to make choices that aren't in the best interest of our health, for our health? And that's what behavior means, or behavioral. Okay. Questions? Does anybody have any questions about the content we covered? Do you have a better understanding of the concepts? Okay.
I have a question about next week.
Oh, go ahead.
So the quiz next week, is it over the readings that you posted for week 3 and like the week 2, or is it just focused on week 3 stuff?
Yeah, I sent out an announcement in week 1 talking about when all the quizzes were and what they were covering. So quiz 2 is in week 3 and it only covers week 3 information.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So will that be at the end of class then?
No, the quizzes are given at the beginning of class. You'll have over the weekend, when I send out my week 3 announcement, you will have a content recording, giving you an introduction to the concepts, you'll have your readings, and you'll have your PowerPoint. And the quiz is given at the beginning of class, like we talked about in week 1 during orientation. Quizzes are given at the beginning of class. I think the slide says, and you went through that orientation PowerPoint with every class. And you went through this, the slide says the same thing. Quizzes are to be given at the beginning of class to assess the preparation. That's what the slide says. So no, it won't be given at the end of class. It'll be given at the beginning. Okay? Well, oh, go ahead.
Would you be open to doing a review? I know like some teachers will do a review before the quiz. Would you be open to do one?
Yeah, we can talk about that. But again, sure, we can talk about that. You mean doing like a quiz review on a Sunday night?
Can I just interrupt you for a second?
Pardon me?
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, who's speaking?
Lisa.
Oh.
Dr. Gutierrez. I'm
Hi.
sorry. I met with some students and they had a concern, so I'm offering a quiz review 1 hour before class for Monday and for Friday. So Friday I would be, but it's on my Zoom link. So it's going to be it would be at 3 o'clock for Friday and then 2 o'clock for Monday. And I'm just going to go over your concepts.
So make sure that I want to get that posted in because we have 2 sections here. One section here is my students, one is yours. So let's make sure that I get that posted into my section as well for Friday students.
Sure.
We do
I was
that.
gonna ask you about that. Yeah.
Great.
I
Great.
sent my students an email, but I can go ahead and I'll just forward you the email that I sent. How's
Okay.
that?
Great.
Okay.
Great. And you're doing this for Friday students and Monday students?
Right. 1 hour before class. So
Okay,
it'll be
great.
about for 15 minutes, you know.
About 15 minutes? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I'll send that to my Monday students as well. Fantastic. We can talk about that over the weekend. Thank you. That's great.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm
So
just
there's your
Thank you.
answer, Devon.
Yeah.
Was it Devon that asked the question?
It's Devin.
Devin? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Great,
Thank
great.
you.
Okay, well, it's good to
Thanks,
see
Devon.
everybody. I hope you have a good weekend. Please reach out if you have any additional questions. And I will stay on for if anybody, myself
I
and
do.
Dr. Okay, one second. Dr. Cupteros and I will stay on for any questions.